I think faith is a very powerful, game-changing gift you give yourself, because no one can actually make you believe something without your consent, and no one can take it away from you without your consent. And so one of the things that really inspires me is a belief in this divine universe where you and I are cells within a much larger body, and we're actually working together to co-create some sort of meta health, meta existence that's beyond what we can see in this little flesh rental suit that we're kind of occupying for a very, very temporary period of time.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it is my pleasure to have Tim Ringgold with us. Tim is a board-certified music therapist, author, and award-winning international speaker, having shared the stage with some of the top minds in music, the brain, and personal development, including Tony Robbins. Tim was also the first person to give a TEDx talk on music therapy in 2012. Tim, it's so great to have you on the show.
Stephan, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So we have a couple of masterminds or groups in common. One of them is METAL, Media Entertainment Technology Alpha Leaders, a great brotherhood founded by Ken Rutkowski. And I actually knew of you from prior to you getting involved in METAL through Genius Network, Joe Polish. I just want to share something really cool before we start our conversation. I was at the annual event, the Genius Network annual event in November. And when I opened Joe's new book, What's in It for Them, I did it with intention. And I'm like, I was trying to demonstrate to somebody I was talking to what the term bibliomancy means and how it works, which is, I learned that term from Yannick Silver. He's the founder of Maverick. And I interviewed him on this podcast a little while ago, maybe a year and a half ago or something. So anyways, open the book up and guess where I end up? The page talking about you.
Oh, shucks.
So yeah, that was awesome. And I knew that wasn't random. That wasn't a coincidence. We already had this interview scheduled. Maybe what we could do is you could start by sharing why Joe Polish put you in his book and what that mention was about.
Sure. So Joe and I are long-term friends. We both share publicly about this. So what I'm about to share is that we're both in long-term recovery from sex addiction. We actually met in a 12-step community in February of 2003. We became fast friends inside of that fellowship. And quickly, I had been accepted to move to college out in California to go to school for music therapy. And I was going to leave Arizona where we had met. And I remember sending him a text saying, hey, I want to stay connected as friends. I think you're pretty funny we have a very funny East Coast kind of wise Alec banter. That was always the nature of our relationship. And that was really fun. And we also added a lot of value to each other's lives. At least we both thought. So we began this long-term friendship, and it's based on banter, which anyone who knows Joe knows that's like Joe's love language is banter. So first of all, Lord knows he loves
picking on Jim Do pretty much at every Genius Network meeting.
Yes. Well, yeah, Jim can take it and Jim can give it back. And that's what's great about that, right? And that's what you have to know. You have to be able to throw it right back at him. And if you can, he really respects that. Doesn't always like it, but he respects it. Having set that up, I have no idea why he put me in his book, except to finally give his book some value. I mean, that's probably the only reason, he was like, maybe I could put something in this book that'll actually be useful. So I'll put a story about Tim because that'll make it useful. So that's just a nod and a wink to Joe. And anyone who knows Joe gets that. Joe is the master connector. That's his superpower. He has this radar for, who is doing great things in the world, and then whose wonder twin power could connect with that person to amplify it. Throughout our recovery journey, we both wanted to help other addicts along the way. And there are there's a handful of different people in the world. There are people who get addicted to something and they're not even aware of it. There are people who get addicted to things and then they become aware of it, but they never find any freedom or liberation from that enslavement, which is the Latin origin of addictio. And then there are people who get addicted to something, find liberation, and go on with their life. But then there's this other group, which realize they're addicted to something, find freedom from it, and then spend the rest of their life turning around and reaching their hand out to free others. And Joe's in that category. And I'm in that category. And that mutual mission that we both are on individually, but at the same time, has kept us friends and kept us together, even though I live now in Southern California and I've been here since 2004. That mutual commitment to making the world a better place, to reduce suffering whenever possible, in whatever way possible. And our highway that we travel together on that road is the road of addiction. Like that day, how it's so funny. Like he had connected me, of course, like how he does. That's his verb, connect. And I was showing up in service for him and for something. And then before you know it, it's like we're spending time together while I'm trying to help him go, manage a really tough situation in his life, while he's trying to show up for someone else and in a really tough situation for them. And then before you know it, we're thinking about just addiction, as we often talk about. And then suddenly it's like, let's do this thing. Let's talk about the role music plays in recovery. And, it would be perfect. Da, 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 da. Let's get Akira on the phone. And before you know it, we're just creating and combining forces for good. And that's one of the things that's amazing about Joe, is that he will come together in a very brief moment of time, and he'll see an opportunity and he'll take immediate action to make that further that down the road. And he'll connect two people in that moment. And one of the great things that's happened over the years with Joe, and why Joe's so amazing, is I'll get these random videos in my phone, and it's Joe plus somebody. And Joe's just met this person, but he can already tell there's like this Venn diagram between Joe, me, and the person. And Joe wants me and the person to connect, to explore that Venn diagram. And then we go on from there. And Joe does that without any like finder's fee, without any commission, without any affiliate, there's like nothing in it for Joe other than moving the world forward in an effort to reduce suffering. And I think that's one of the, like his eulogy should be like, for all the things Joe does in the world to create income, great. But the impact that he creates is like exponentially more because of this very thing that he does on a daily basis.
Yeah. I'd say it's true for everyone that our ripple effect is much larger than we realize.
Yeah, 100%.
It spans universes even.
And, you don't get to see how it ends up. Like, that's the beauty of it. Like, so I like to think of like ripples in a pond where, when you throw a pebble or a rock when you're a kid into the pond, you see the impact. But you don't see the water ripple up at the far end of the pond, 10 seconds later or a minute later or 2 minutes later. You've already moved on to your next adventure as a kid. And I think about that as a human, like the impact we have. We don't stick around. We're on to the next thing. We're constantly moving through time and space. And so the ripples go out beyond our vision and beyond our like horizon. And that's kind of fascinating, and it gives you this opportunity to really be like responsible for the EMP that you are walking like you, like, any one of us, like, we give off this energy wherever we go, and that energy affects and influences and impacts. And we are not aware of its full, there it goes. Well, I've lost the view now because I'm still steaming down the road going this way. There's an acronym that I like to use, which is ABC. And it just means always be cool. Because like you don't know and you can't control the impact, you just don't know where those ripples are going to end up and how they're going to come back. And, you meet somebody in a chance situation over here, you don't know that, bing, bang, boom, the ripples come back around and suddenly you get interacting with that person in a much different situation a year later. And you had no idea that that was ever going to happen when you met them the first time. So send off that good energy the first time, send off that good energy every time. Feels good.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about you being Neo in the Matrix, everyone you interact with is part of this Matrix illusion. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're not human or they're not a soul. It means that there is something divine powering this whole thing.
100%.
And if we are cognizant of that when we're interacting with somebody, and we're not just thinking about that interaction, but we're thinking that God's acting through this person to deliver a message, or an opportunity for me to deliver that person a message, or for an opportunity for us to collaborate to co-create something amazing, then every moment's a miracle, and we just wait to see it unfold. And sometimes we don't see it unfold until much later on, and even perhaps after we pass back on into non-physical, do we see the true ripple effect of our actions, our words, our deeds, our thoughts in that moment.
That's a really powerful point, because I think a lot of people want to see the return on their investment now and see why things happen the way they happen, or get to the promised land, if you will, to use an Old Testament reference. But I remember with my dad, having this conversation with my dad early in life, where something tragic had happened, and it was before anything tragic had happened to me, and I had plenty of tragedy happen to me along the way afterwards. So it really helped me. And it was like, he said, "Oh, you've gotten to the point where you're struggling with why bad things happen to good people." And I was like, yeah. And my dad was a philosophy major, so like he likes to think about thinking and really have these kind of meta conversations, or did. And the way it made sense to me at some point was that, like, I don't get to see the whole thing from where I am. And so I have to trust in the fact. And I love the idea that, people think about the universe, it's either benevolent or malevolent. If you think it's malevolent, I could try to convince you it's not, but ultimately you're the one in your head who makes that decision, right? So for me, faith, which is like this belief in something with the absence of knowledge, it's a gift you give yourself. Because if I give myself the gift of the belief of a benevolent universe, inside of that framework, I see everything happening for me. If I think about the universe as malevolent, I see everything happening to me. You can't convince me otherwise. I'm the one who makes that ultimate decision for myself. And so I think faith is a very powerful, game-changing gift you give yourself, because no one can actually make you believe something without your consent, and no one can take it away from you without your consent. And so one of the things that really inspires me is a belief in this divine universe where you and I are cells within a much larger body, and we're actually working together to co-create some sort of meta health, meta existence that's beyond what we can see in this little flesh rental suit that we're kind of occupying for a very, very temporary period of time and space, right? Like, this tiny thing does not stick around very long, doesn't go very far, but it thinks
it's a blink of an eye.
It's a blink. It thinks it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it is just a blink, right? And that actually comforts me. It like it helps put my own suffering and my own drama in perspective.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. It's funny you mentioned the concept of a benevolent universe versus a malevolent one, because that's the topic of the book I'm working on.
No way.
Yeah, it's called Living in a Friendly Universe, A Skeptic's Guide to the Unseen World.
Oh, that's brilliant. Game on. I mean, that's, if you can, it's just, things are happening. This is the thing about being a human. Things are happening. And then in our heads, we're trying to make sense out of what's happening. So the whole making sense thing is an inside job. What's happening out there, the meaning I give it is all in here. And for those of you, I don't know, listening to this, I'm pointing to my head when I say in here. This is happening between my ears, my sense of whether this is good for me or it's bad for me. This is good for the planet. It's bad for the planet. All of that meaning is being made up in my head. At least I believe it is, like, because my experience of the out there, I grew up playing sports. I grew up watching sports. So I have this analogy, which is like when you watch the Super Bowl, the event, right? The game itself out there is being played. And you've got, like, depending on the score, when the time's up, you have like 3 different reactions going on out there or in people's heads. One is, it was great. And that's if you're a fan of the team that won. A second making sense of that event is, it was terrible, because you're a fan of the team that lost. And then there's a third person out there, the neutral, who really didn't care about the game. They just wanted to watch the commercials. But it's the same event. It's you know what I mean? It's a game being played, and yet we have all these different opinions about it. Though all those opinions are an inside job. And so I think if people can understand and own that we're making up all this meaning all the time, there's a lot of freedom suddenly to be like, oh, well, if I'm making it up anyway, why don't I make up something that's inspiring or empowering or comforting or curious or funny, right? Rather than depressing, different, disenfranchising, irritating, oppressing, right? There's just like so many ways we could go with it and kind of play around with it. And I just think that that's a really great thing to figure out. If you can like chew on that, swallow that, and like suddenly realize I'm making it all up anyway in my head. Why don't I make up something that works for me and the world around me?
And yet a diehard materialist would say, but you can't argue with the fact that X, Y, and Z is happening, this war or this famine or this tsunami or this whatever, insert in the blank natural disaster. What kind of a God puts people through that kind of suffering? That doesn't seem fair. That doesn't seem right. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's always a good one, because the arrogance of humans trying to understand God cracks me up. Mm-hmm. Just cracks me up. So I'm going to tell you a story. My wife and I, we had our second daughter was born in 2009 and died in 2010 from a rare childhood disease called epidermolysis bullosa, or EB for short.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She was part of a clinical trial to try to save her. We went to Minnesota for the summer of 2010 to go through a bone marrow transplant to try to save her. And the bone marrow transplant worked, but she died of the side effects after spending 100 days in the ICU on life support. I was her caregiver. I was in that 10 by 10 room every day for 14 hours a day, pretty much. And it was a pretty intense experience. I blogged about the journey because I wanted other parents of the disease to kind of know about this trial, and HIPAA prevented the doctors from giving too much details, but didn't prevent me from talking about it. So what I would do is every night after the long, hellish day I went through, I would blog about that day, and I would write until I got to a place of gratitude for the day. Sometimes it took a lot of writing. And I really had to do some like mental yoga to really stretch all the things that had happened that day to look at it in some sort of positive context. But it became like a muscle. But one day, and then what I would do, I'd blog, I'd go to bed, and then the blog was read around the world. So I'd wake up in the morning, I would walk to this park on the way to the hospital. I would read the comments of support, and then I would say a prayer, and I would say, God, please hold my fear. I'll pick it up on the way out. I do not want to enter this hospital with any fear. I don't want my daughter to pick up on any fear. I don't want the doctors to pick up on any fear. I'll pick it up on my way out. Thank you for holding that for me. And this was this morning practice I had. And this one morning, as I'm praying, I get a very clear signal. This little voice in my head says, I'm taking her home. And I said, what? Regardless of whoever you're listening to this, whether you have a belief in God or you believe you can talk to God, I've been talking to God my whole life. So I'm just going to tell you in full authenticity, I'm having this experience. God says, I'm taking her home. And I said, oh, no, you didn't. You did not send me to Minneapolis. I literally wrote a book called Bella's Blessings, A Humble Story of Providence, because I had been seeing Providence throughout her whole life. And I was like, you did not lead me to Minnesota only to take her home. There's no way that was no way. So finally he's like, listen, look down. I'm like, okay. He goes, do you see the ants? What? So I'm sitting on a park bench and there's a sidewalk, and the sidewalk is broken into those sections where there's like a little crevice and there's a bunch of ants going back and forth in the crevice like a freeway. I said, he goes, do you see the ants? I go, yeah. He goes, are the ants in your reality? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you stepped on them, would you affect their reality? I said, yeah. Okay. Look up. So I look up and I see the Minneapolis skyline, which I parked myself on this bench every morning so I could enjoy this view. He says, can the ants see what you see? And I put my head back down. No. And he said, my son, just because you can see my signs doesn't mean you understand my mind. And it was like a parent consoling a child who was having a temper tantrum over go to bed. And it's like the kid doesn't understand why that's good for them. The kid just, and the kid has a temper tantrum, right? And I was having a temper tantrum because I didn't understand why, but it wasn't my place. And that's the thing, that the fundamental flaw is that people try to equate logic and rationality and understanding at a level of the divine creator of the universe. You're not there. You're a human being walking around on a rock in cold, dark space in a meat suit for a very short period of time. Little do you know. Little do you know. And sometimes humans just need a kick of humility right in the teeth to bring them back down to earth. You have no idea. You don't even know how your own brain works. You don't know how the car you drive takes you from point A to point B. You don't understand why your toilet flushes the way it does. Like, you are a tiny, tiny ant on this rock. Please don't try to understand the whole thing from where you are. That's why faith exists. That's the point of faith. If everything was understood, it would be knowledge. There would be no need for faith. Faith is a gift to make sense out of that which you can't know. That's the point of it.
Yeah. It's like wisdom. Wisdom is also a gift from God.
100%.
And understanding can interfere with your receiving of the wisdom because you're trying to figure it out, power through it on your own. And you forget that, wait a second, there's a miraculous stuff going on here that I can't possibly comprehend. I need to pray for some wisdom here. And when Solomon was granted any wish he wanted by God, King Solomon asked for wisdom. And because he answered with that wise answer, God gave him everything else as a bonus as well. There's this quote I want to share with you about a miracle, and I want your take on this. I learned this from Kabbalah. A miracle isn't defined as when the impossible becomes possible. A miracle is defined as removing the illusionary veils that don't allow us to see the light in every experience and moment.
That's great. It's all right there, just hidden from view. I think that we tend to rely a little bit too much on our earthly sight. The amount of real estate in the human brain that's dedicated to, physical sight is enormous. It's a ridiculous amount of real estate in our brain to see the natural world around us. And so it's really easy to go all in on physical sight. And, humans, we know that we only see so much of the visual spectrum, right? As it is, we know that we only see a limited amount of just the physical spectrum. And I think about, like, what are all the things that are happening around me? Like you mentioned, Neo, like, where's all the code, like literally just beyond whatever my block is. And this is great because I am crystal clear that this one area of my life that I'm struggling with right now, it's me in the way. All the things that I quote unquote want to have, they're out there. They're all around me. We live in an abundant universe. Others are enjoying them, whatever it is. it's not that it's for some reason, there's something in me that's in the way of me seeing it. That's pretty clear to me. I'm the one in the way, and I remember hearing this phrase once, which was, I just need to get out of my own way. I thought that was a funny phrase. It's like, I don't understand that at all. What are these people saying? Who is this, wannabe enlightened person? I just need to get out of my way. Or I finally got out of my own way. And I was just like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I remember hearing Brene Brown speak. She does a lot of research on shame. And as someone who works in addiction, shame is like that's just the heaviest of emotion that addicts feel as a result of their behavior. She said, it's not so much people can't access joy and well-being. It's that there's something displacing it. Something's in the way, literally sitting like you said, like an illusion, like a veil. It's in the way of the joy. It's not like you don't get to have it. It's you've got something in between that you've got to actually remove to access it, or needs to be removed. And one of the great mysteries in 12-step is praying for that understanding of how I can't seem to remove this on my own. My own effort, my own will isn't doing the job.
Yeah. Heck, we can't even breathe a single breath without the aid of the Creator.
Yeah. Tony Robbins is, if you ever listen to Tony through a spiritual lens, you'll hear Tony Robbins is a very spiritual human being.
Oh yeah.
And he talks about like your heartbeat. It's like, you didn't earn it. You didn't do it. It's a gift. It was given to you, and you don't do anything to keep it going in terms of like, you don't say beat. It beats. What is that? That's grace. That was a gift given to you. And breath is the same way. Like, you didn't earn it. You didn't say anything like, today I'm going to start breathing. It's a good day to start breathing. Here I go. You were given breath, and then you're and onward. And I really appreciate that there's this conundrum, like pray like it's up to God, but work like it's up to you. How do you surrender the outcome while simultaneously cause the process, and find that not to be completely insane making? Like, I don't know. I want to control the outcome. I'm putting all the inputs in. I want to see the output. How do you just surrender that and let that go at the same time? I think that's a pickle a lot of people find themselves in, and they kind of swing one direction or the other too far, right? They go the secret route, which is, I'm just going to turn it over, and like, I'm not going to lift a finger. I'm just going to think these thoughts, but I'm not going to actually put, rub two sticks together to cause the fire.
Checks.
I'm just going to wait
more
for
checks in the mail.
Visualize checks in the mail. I went there 2000, whatever year it was that came out. I was like, visualize checks in the mail. Oh, it turned out that wasn't enough. And
that
then
was a good movie though. That was really,
it was a great movie.
I loved it.
It is a very well made movie. Absolutely. Yes. And when I listened to the audiobook and she said, all you need to do to lose weight is think thin thoughts, I thought, I think there's something missing there.
There is, just a little.
This is a part of it. This is definitely a piece of the equation. It's a piece of the secret, maybe. And it's brilliant marketing, of course. But at the same time, what do you need to do? What do you need to cause? It's like this conundrum of like, I want to attract versus I want to cause. One is I'm going to allow things to come into my existence. One is I'm going to go out there and make these things happen. And can they both occur at the same time? Is it an either or? Is it a combination of the two? I think that's a tough one to find balance in.
My take on it is a combination of the two. It's like you have to live in two worlds at the same time, in a way. Like, for example, if you're starting to see the Matrix, you see the illusionary nature of reality. You're starting to glimpse it. You're like, okay, this is a simulation. This is totally a simulation. I just saw yet another glitch in the Matrix.
Right.
I'm being punked here. Like, this is a game. And at the same time, you have to treat every person, even if you believe with every fiber of your being, that person is an NPC, like a non-player character.
I was about to say the same acronym.
Right? And yes, that does exist. You have to treat that person like they could be your long-lost brother from another lifetime.
Yep.
because that's the nature of the game, is to play full out. So you're not sucked into the game. You know that there's a game. There are rules. There's a way to play the game, and yet you don't get sucked into it too much. You're treating people with absolute loving kindness, respect, so forth, even if they are running a program. It's fun.
Well said. It is fun. It's definitely a practice. Like, because, so I've been through a few different tragedies along the way that kind of help wake me up to the, the reality of life and death. And, you got to remember, like, our culture, we're at the top of the food chain in evolution, like humanity. Well, I live in the United States in the 21st century, where it's as good as it's ever been. Our adversity muscles have atrophied a wee bit. And so resilience is this ability to get back up after being knocked down. We don't get knocked down too much. And so our resilience ability, muscles grow under stress and bones grow under the stress of gravity, right? So we haven't had a lot of stress by comparison to the human experience. So I feel like we're a little bit soft in one particular area, which is witnessing life and death. We don't see our food. Where does our food come from? My kids used to think there were two different types of chicken: the chicken they ate and the chicken on farms. That's a real story. I swear to you that I did not make that up. My daughter was like, "That's not chicken, Dad. That's chicken. I'm like, "Oh my God, you have two different chickens in your head? What?" She's like, "Yeah, the ones on the farm versus the ones you eat." And I was like, oh, you suburban child, you've been so removed. Wow.
How'd you break that one to her?
Right. That was tough for her, and then she became a non-chicketarian for quite a while, where she would not eat chicken. And
I bet.
I think we're currently back to eating chicken. It's a sometimes food, but like the circle of life and death in suburban life, is very much removed. Right.
Yeah.
So in my early 20s,
so carefully shrink wrapped and with a nice label on it and everything.
You can't even witness how your food's made. It's illegal to witness it. Let's just,
that is crazy.
That's crazy. If you attempt to videotape how your
you will go to
food is
prison.
made, it is a federal offense. It is a felony. You're tried as an eco-terrorist. These are the laws of the land in the 21st century. That is messed up, if you ask me, but that's slightly tangential to where I was going.
But yet you got to see the hand of God in even something that wrong.
That would be one where I'd be like, okay, Stephan, where is the hand of God in Tyson Foods or Monsanto?
We can go to that. We can go there if you want.
I remember writing an email to Monsanto saying, "Please stop being evil. I don't understand you. I can't understand.
Did it make a difference?
See." Nah, it turns out I don't think it made a difference. I'm not sure anyone read it. I didn't get a response, but I felt called to say something. That's as activist as I get right there. So anyhow, I lost my dad when I was 25, my daughter 38. My 5 best friends were murdered when I was 22 in a small town in Connecticut. And that's the kind of place that doesn't happen. And I had to learn really quickly that tomorrow does not necessarily follow today. And we live into a future like Stand By Me, the song, it says, "We know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me." Not Stand By Me, lean on me. Mm-hmm. Except there's not always tomorrow. So when you're playing the game, how do you play the game like there is both a tomorrow and yet there may not be a tomorrow for you? How, one of the things I've had to find is a way to be complete right now, still not be satisfied, still be hungry, and if you remember, what was the movie with Gladiator? So Gladiator, at the end, for those of you who remember the movie Gladiator, he had this African kind of sidekick who survives. And at the last scene, he's praying to his ancestors. And he says, "I may join you one day." And then he says, "But not today." Mm-hmm. Not today. Like that, like he wanted to put a vote in for himself that today is not the day he joined his ancestors. So for a long time, every time I got on a plane, because when you get on a plane, the illusion of control gets ripped from your precious little hands, because you really know you're no longer in control because you're not flying the plane. So when I would take off, Stephan, I would say a quick prayer to my daughter and my dad. And I would say, today might be the day. I might see you guys. getting on a plane. Lord knows how this is going to turn out. But for what it's worth, how about not today? And then I would just let go while I was flying. And flying was like this immensely serene spiritual experience because I had literally given up the control of my life. And I was just floating through the air. And then we'd land. And when the plane would hit the ground, okay, not today, that little moment. And now I practice Wim Hof breathing every morning, which I think, in fact, we have breathed together before in Metal, in the breathing
virtually
group.
on Zoom. Yep.
Virtually on Zoom. And so as a part of my practice, with Wim Hof breathing, you exhale, and then your breath hold is, you're not really holding your breath because there's no breath in your lungs. You've exhaled. So it's kind of like it's a not breath hold. And to me, it's simulating death. That was my last breath, because you die on an exhale. And so every morning, I practice this little bit of spiritual death where I'm like, okay, this is what it's going to feel like. And then I imagine who's going to be there, and I imagine what the feeling's like. And then it's time to take a breath. And I'm like, okay, it's not today. And I rehearse my death. And I know that might sound bizarre to people listening to this, but here's where I'm going with all this. To your point about the game, like, I'm willing and ready to play the game today. And I'm also willing and ready for the game to be over today. So that, because no one knows when it ends. That was the big wake up call when my daughter died, was like, oh, wow, nobody has any idea when the game ends. So I had to explain to my other daughter death when she's 4.5 years old. Good luck trying to explain life and death to a 4.5-year-old. You got to get really concrete. And what I said to her, I said, babe, about our soul in our body. And she knew that by then. I said, these bodies, I said, they're just rentals. They're just rentals. And the funny thing is, what makes the game really interesting is you never know the day you have to turn it back in. And Bella had to turn hers in. Like, that just made the whole game make sense to me.
Yep.
So that I could rock this rental until the day that I have to turn it in. And I want to be like, oh, today's the day. Because I remember the day Bella died, it was like, oh, today's the day. Like, she was living, she was fighting. We walked into the hospital Monday morning, October 10th, 2010. She was no longer living. She was dying. You could see it. And it was like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, we fought a good fight, and today's the day. But here's the thing. I consider going through that journey with my daughter a gift for me. Like, that was a gift to witness the birth, life, and death of another human being while I'm still alive. Was a huge gift to how I see life. Like, it has opened my eyes to what this gift is in a way that wasn't revealed before that. That's the only way I know how to explain that.
Wow. She did that for you. She opted in.
Yeah, totally.
To do that.
Totally. Yeah, we had a really, really, really extraordinary ride together. And both my wife and I felt very complimented that she wanted to come through us to do what she was here to do, and that she felt like we were up to the task, and that we could be good play buddies in the sandbox. And so we really played together for as long as, and the thing about her disease was, kids with her disease went at any time. They could go at any time for multiple reasons. So you really didn't know how much time you had with them. It was like the bell curve of her disease is pretty much everybody dies by their teenage years at some point in their teens, but they die just at any point in between, like randomly. And they call it an occult infection, but oftentimes their body just stops because of the rigor of the disease. So that kind of in your face temporariness of it all, versus like you and me, like we're living decades, it's easy to think there's going to be a lot more where this came from. But when it's like the finality of it's right in front of you, it was like I had to shift the way I thought about the whole thing. Again, how do I make sense of all this in a way that I can get out of bed in the morning, be useful, and then be able to turn my brain off at night and go back to bed without it being like, what's going on? Right. So I think that's part of what, like, I think there's like a test for faith. Like, I don't really care what you believe in, so long as it like inspires you to get out of bed, inspires you to kind of to be the best version of you during the day, and then comforts you enough to where you can turn the monkey mind off and actually fall asleep. Because like if your mindset of and worldview can check all three boxes, more power to you. That works for me. I get bummed when people get hooked on what I believe. It's like, why do you care what I believe as opposed to what it produces?
Yeah.
Like you and I don't have to believe the same thing, so long as the outcome for both of us is that we're unleashed, we're empowered, we're increased. The best version of us shows up in the world. The world is increased and blessed by our being in it. I don't give a rip how you organize your mythology or your beliefs. That is not, that'll be like me getting mad for people speaking French. Why don't you speak English? If I think, like, why?
Yeah, that's funny thing about beliefs, it's like when I went to India and I got my first spiritual awakening, it was at a Tony Robbins Platinum Partner trip, and Tony brought in these oneness monks, and when one of them touched me on the head, it gave me a psychedelic experience. It was a oneness blessing.
Wow.
I'd never experienced any kind of drugs before. I've never done anything.
Wow.
So that was wild to have that kind of psychedelic trip, everything in Technicolor and everything, the deep connection to the creator. And I was agnostic up until that point. When I was
no kidding.
Yeah. When I was
That's
in India,
nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I'm so grateful for that. That opened the door to incredible, miraculous transformations that are continuing to go on right now for me.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. But this is a phrase that really stuck with me that I learned from the monks. And that is this: the divine is an experience, not a belief. And that's what I had, was an experience of the divine. So I could learn, I could study, I could get indoctrinated, I could go to church or whatever and get beliefs. It pales in comparison to the experience of God.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I resonate with that.
Yeah, me too. Now there's one concept I wanted to share with you I learned recently, and I want to get your take on it. My understanding is that we get 5 potential off-ramps off the freeway, 5 potential death dates, and we can choose. There was one for me when I was in my early 20s. I fell asleep behind the wheel, been driving all night, and I hit this huge lamppost going 65, 70 miles an hour. It popped right out of its socket. My car spun out. I was towing a U-Haul trailer, and the car was completely totaled. I walked away without a scratch.
Wow.
That was one of the death date potential off-ramps that I chose not to take. My soul chose not to take that. What do you believe or feel to be true about this idea of our death dates?
That's a really interesting concept. I've never really thought about when it is like that it's from that level of autonomy or agency. All I can do is look at my own experience and kind of try to wrap my brain around what I've observed. But then even still, if I think about it, like I'm thinking through it, and as I'm thinking through it, I'm noticing I'm like ascending ladders of where I'm thinking from. So the first place I just went was like human. And then I thought like, well, no, let's think about this through a spiritual lens. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because from that lens, we chose this whole thing. Like
the whole script has been written.
The whole thing. Exactly. The whole thing. Like we played this out. Like so with Bella, maybe it was the third day she was born. I was already running out of adrenaline, and I had like a little bit of a nervous, like almost like a psychotic break in the bathroom that morning when I woke up and realized I went to go to the bathroom. I was half asleep, and I was like in that kind of like half here, half there world. And then when reality and consciousness kind of kicked in, the overwhelming nature of what was going on blew me away. My daughter's in the ICU in one hospital. My wife is recovering from a C-section in the hospital next door. There's a tunnel that connects the two, and I'm having to be in both places at the same time somehow. Oh, and I have another daughter at grandma's house that I'm supposed to be parenting somehow at the same time. And I was breaking apart, and I was sitting in the ICU they call it the NICU, the neonatal ICU. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at Bella, and I'm like, there's no way this is a coincidence. And what I mean by that is I had just become certified as a NICU music therapist, and Bella ended up being my first patient.
Mm-hmm.
And the cosmic events that had to occur, like the training to become a NICU music therapist was happening the week of the scheduled C-section. So it was like I couldn't go to Florida to do the training. I asked them, can we do it sooner? Not knowing that she had a diagnosis of this disease. It was totally undiagnosed. And so they like bent over backwards to accommodate me. They let me do the training. Like they did a private one-on-one training with me so that I could do it in the timeline that I was hoping to do it in. None of us knowing that I would be literally in the hospital with my daughter. She'd be my first patient. So it was just this cosmic coincidence. And there were like multiple levels of that. And so finally I just looked at her and I was like, okay, let's really think about this through a spiritual lens. We're here playing a game in the sandbox. This is not by accident. But like the little Men in Black magic forgetting pen, like when we come to Earth, we wave the pen, we forget the game.
That's very real so that
too. Right. So that it seems real.
I'm totally veil like forgetting is what it's called.
Yes. The veil of forgetting. Yes. Yeah. So the Men in Black, pen, like I totally think
spiritual amnesia. That's another way to refer to it.
Spiritual amnesia. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I think the pen has some design flaws because it seems like I have some past memories, very clear times before and times in between that I can still access, that I'm just like, oh, I wish that pen was a little more complete, but it's okay. So I'm sitting there with her and I'm like, we had to dream this up together. We just had to. There was no way we didn't dream this up. So, and then I began to think, well, Bella, you must be a really old soul to have thought this time around you want to come with a disease where your skin's not connected to your body and you're going to die in childhood. Like how many lives have you lived where this seemed like the next right thing to do spiritually? You must be the teacher. We must be the students. Mm-hmm. So on day 3, she became the master. Mm-hmm. And I took my cues from her.
Wow.
And I took my cues from God. I was like, this is school where school is clearly in session. So no joke. I'm like, this is all the hand of God. This is providence. Okay, I'm in. I get it. That's how I'm going to make sense out of this. So I leave the NICU and I take the shuttle bus to the parking garage. And as I'm in the shuttle bus, the word providence comes to mind. And I'm like, that's what this is called when you're in this, like the hand of God is kind of making this all happen. And as I think about it, I look out the window, Stephan, I'm on Providence Street in Orange, California. And then I look past the street sign and I'm parked. We're like at a stop sign next to the Providence building. And it's like giant, those like Trump Tower letters, like Providence, it's huge. And I'm like, okay.
That is awesome.
I picked it up from the street sign, but I really get this. Okay. I get it now. So when she left, it was like, okay, your work was done. Mm-hmm. And what was really fascinating was the day she left was the day in the clinical trial that she was up to do, like for them to do a biopsy of her skin, because it was a bone marrow transplant to see if they took my other daughter's bone marrow, my other daughter has healthy skin, gave it to Bella, would Allie's bone marrow in Bella start to produce marrow that would produce Allie's skin on Bella, but from the inside out, not a skin graft.
Right.
Now, what's really interesting about that was that because Bella died when she died, and it was that day in the study, they could do a biopsy of her throat because she was dead. Mm-hmm. They couldn't have done a biopsy of her throat if she was still alive. They were able to do a biopsy of her throat and find out that 25% of the cells were Allie's.
Wow.
And 33% or 30% was all you needed for it to be like working tissue. And they never would have been able to prove that even internal skin, which, your epithelial tissue, they would never have been able to test that. So it was a complete breakthrough in science that she picked the day, to the day, so that it could happen exactly the way it happened, because she was here to be part of that study. Yeah. It was clear. It was so clear, Stephan, that we had a book outside of her hospital room where we had the staff write in the book, what did you learn from Bella? Bella is here teaching us all. What did you learn? And it was a journal. And there's these journal entries in there that are so touching from all these different staff from, who knows what walks of life, but they all interacted with Bella and they all learned something. And so she was clearly here as a teacher. And the other thing that she taught all of us was that impact has nothing to do with length of time. She didn't need to say anything because, in fact, she never did. She got a breathing tube because she was intubated. Thank you. The only thing she ever said was the night before she was intubated, or the night of, we were trying to kind of suction her mouth because literally all her skin was falling off in her mouth, in the inside and in her throat. She was choking on it, and we're trying to suction it out, and she's fighting us. And the first word, the only word I ever heard her say was no. She was fighting us. Then we suctioned her, and then she said, ow. And those are the only two words I ever heard her say. Her whole life was lived just through her being, but not through her words. And it was a great reminder that go be who you want to be in the world. Don't talk about it. Go be it. Because humans learn through action, through observing other humans in action. That's how we learn. The language you spoke first, no one taught it to you. You just observed it. So go be the thing you want other people to learn how to do. Don't spend your time talking about it. Go out there every day. The person in front of you in line, the person who cuts you in line today, go be love to that person. It doesn't take any words, right? And you may not have tomorrow. So don't think, well, I'll do it tomorrow. No, you may not have tomorrow. You may have decided today was the day. From her journey, it was clear that she had picked her on ramp and off ramp. So that's a really interesting topic.
Yeah. In Arabic, there's a word called maktub, which means it is written.
Yes. Yes.
I learned this from the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
It's a great book.
So if it's already written, this whole script, this whole movie, where's free will?
Ooh, what is free will?
I have my own answer. I want to hear yours first.
The idea that I'm co-creating in the moment, having forgotten that I already wrote it out. So let's put it this way. As a musician, I'll never forget. One day I was in school and I had this, very lucky to go to a school that had this master conductor, famous master choral conductor. And one day we learned all the parts, the script. And he said, okay, now let's make music out of it. I didn't even know what he meant, because to me, following the script was making music. And it was like, no, that's just the script. Now, how do we express the script in a way that's art? How do actors take words off a page and make us cry? They're just words on a page. It's something in the process that's magical. It's not what it's like when you, this is great. So growing up as an athlete, watching the Olympics, watching figure skating, they get 2 scores. They get technical merit, and then they would get artistic merit. I don't know if they still score that way. I haven't watched it in a long time. But when I was a kid, I remember there were these 2 things. It wasn't so much that you did it, it was how you did it, process. And what did that make others feel? Because ultimately, that's what art does. It makes you feel something.
Yeah, I love this quote that people don't remember what you told them. They remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely. And if that wasn't important, art wouldn't exist. So for me, art is the expression of the creation of feeling. It's a process. and it links us. Life as a medium itself, because life is a medium. Your lifestyle is a creation. It is an expression. Even if you had written the score already, it's not enough to have written the score. It's how do you perform it? The orchestra doesn't, they have the score, but we all know that there are certain performances of great works that get recorded and listened to, and there are certain performances that don't. Why is that? Why are certain performances constantly replayed and bought and others not? It's the same score. So it must not be the score. It must be the execution. So for me, I think therein lies the game is, how do you want to express yourself? How do you want to express the notes on the page? How do you want to make music out of your life? That sounds interesting.
So you want to hear my take?
All right. Yeah, this is juicy.
All right. So if we have our death date off ramps already set, preset by us, we're co-creating this reality. We wrote the script with God, but we get lots of scripts. We wrote all of them and their timelines. And we can choose to jump timelines. The more benevolent we are, the more outside our comfort zone we go. Outside of our normal timeline, our normal script, that's where we get a timeline upgrade, get a whole new script that was also written by us, co-written. So that's my understanding of it. Let's say, for example, that in this timeline that we're on currently, there's a war. In a timeline where we do not currently occupy, but we want to occupy, we have faith in God, we have trust that everything is for our highest and best good, and we are focused on what we want, not on what we don't want. So that's really the law of attraction. It's not like checks.
There you go.
Checks. I want checks in the mail. It's that where I put my attention is where I expect to be jumped to. Quantum jumping, timeline jumping, whatever you want to call it. So you feed with your energy and your attention the timeline that you are either on currently or that you want to be on. So by being more benevolent, being more outside your comfort zone, if you're in robotic consciousness, kind of autopilot mode, you give $5 to each homeless person you see, but this time you empty your wallet because you get the nudge from above. Well, that's uncomfortable. That's outside my comfort zone, but I did it. And then that person is able to buy the medicine that they weren't able to get. They don't normally get enough money other than just to feed themselves. And so they skip their medicine. And that's where we get the timeline upgrades. Everything's already written, Maktub, but it's a whole slew of scripts that we can choose from depending on our benevolence and our focus. That's my understanding of it.
That it reminds me that the levels of existence literally know no boundaries. To quote Men in Black again, random. The very end of the movie, the very last scene, the cut is where it zooms out of the planet. I think this is Men in Black. I might be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Men in Black. It zooms out planet Earth, and then it zooms out to like universe or like galaxy, and then universe, and zoom. And then like the galaxy or the universe itself was a marble that a being was playing with. And it was one of like a set of like 12 marbles that were like on the ground. Mm-hmm. And the being picks up all the marbles and puts it in its bag and like, pieces out, whatever. And what I loved about that scene was like trying to understand levels of awareness comes in like waves. Just the idea of multiple scripts, remembering that in one part of my brain, I do like the idea of this quantum world of infinite possibility. The idea of it was first introduced to me in What the Bleep Do We Know way back in the day. And it was like a little hard to like wrap your brain around. Like I had to like create some new brain cells, and okay, this is how it works. Wow.
Oh, by the way, it's 1:11 right at this moment. Just happened to be looking at the clock.
So there you go. So it was like, okay, there's more going on than I think on a daily basis. The idea of the multiple scripts and upgrading reminds me like oh yeah, there's always more going on
Mm-hmm.
beyond, that's just outside of my awareness. And that's part of the game too, is like, how do I ascend awareness, upgrade awareness? And I think awareness, like consciousness awareness, in the world of recovery from addiction that I work in on a daily basis, it's a waking up, layer by layer by layer,
Yeah.
and kind of like a ladder, almost, and helping. And we go back to this very boots on the ground, bringing it back, which is, when you know better, you do better.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just start with like one thing, like, did you know like stress triggers cravings? Did you know your brain's designed to do the behavior? Like, people, like these little nuggets, right? And then they're like, whoa. And it's like, so then stress matters. Yep. Okay. Did you know when you breathe through your nose, it relaxes you? When you breathe through your mouth, it arouses you? What? Did you know? Okay, cool. Thank you. Boots on the ground. Now I've just woken up a little bit to how to regulate my body to help me through my experience in the moment.
Mm. Yeah.
If I don't get all the way back down to boots on the ground, like I'm in this organic suit that does have some cause effect things, right? Like, I'm going to start there and then I'm going to work my way up. Then there's no end to it.
Yeah.
There's no finish line.
Mm. Yeah.
And I definitely subscribe to the fact that there's no finish line.
Yeah. It's all about the journey.
And I think it's one of the reasons why I don't pursue fast cars and big houses, because I can't take them with me.
So if we're living in a rented suit, by the way, I learned not long ago that our soul is not in our body. Our body is in our soul.
That's cool.
Yeah, our soul is much larger than our body. Taking that analogy a bit further, so you're renting this meat suit. If you're receiving thoughts instead of making them yourself, right? I learned this also in India from those oneness monks, that we are receivers, like FM receivers, antennas.
Yes, like an antenna, 100%.
Okay.
Definitely an antenna.
So those thoughts are not ours. So we don't need to feel shame or guilt or embarrassment over those thoughts if they're not the highest, most pure thoughts. We just recognize, oh, that's not my thought. And then we can dismiss it. We can send it away. We can. I learned this exercise from receiving it directly from God, is that just imagine yourself in the center, your heart center, your energetic heart center. This light of your beingness just explodes outward. And it's not that it's incinerating whatever is attached to you or whispering into your consciousness, because your vibration is a bit lower and it's found a crack to whisper something really not helpful to you. It's that you're sending it to the infinite light. En Sof is what it's called in Hebrew. You're sending it to the Creator for transformation. It's the thought and whoever is behind it. So whatever entity or unhelpful soul that hasn't crossed over or whatever, who's kind of hitching a ride, enjoying the addiction with you because perhaps they had that same addiction when they were incarnated, you send them to En Sof, and it's just instantaneous. It's a boom, done, just like a flash. And I do that myself dozens of times a day.
Wow.
And this quote I want to share with you encapsulates this concept of being impeccable with the thoughts that enter your consciousness, to get them out if they don't serve you, or if they're not a vibrational match with who you want to be and who you truly are. And the quote goes like this: guard the gates to the mind. Satan keeps knocking, polluting our thoughts, seeing if we'll take the bait. What he's selling is all an illusion.
Yeah. I was just waiting to see if there was more. That's really good. There's Earl Schoaf, I think, has a quote: stand guard at the doorway of your mind. And it's interesting, like it's like spiritual immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Like when your immune system's working, it chews up all the bugs that are already, knocking. They're there. They're in there. They're waiting. They're waiting for you to be weak. It's not that, they're not in there. They're just waiting. That's physical immunity. Spiritual immunity. Satan's waiting, just hanging around, waiting for you to get tired, waiting for you to get low,
and he's
in
actually
your
up
energy.
leveling with you. So as you climb the spiritual ladder, he's coming up with you. So you got to be careful to not get fooled by him, because he might sound like a guide.
Oh, that's an interesting
Yeah,
thought.
I got fooled by
Wow.
him big time.
What is that great movie? Is it called Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino? Not that Keanu Reeves can act his way out of a paper bag, but the concept at the very end of it is that Satan's right back there where he started with Keanu Reeves' character. The moment that Keanu Reeves thinks that he's outwitted the devil is just like, ha ha ha, hold my beer, watch this. I'm going to play this card. And like the whole thing, you're just like, oh, wow. Okay. Talk about vigilance. Vigilance is required because this guy is cunning and will appeal to, any angle to get in.
The thing I love the most about all of this is that who does the devil work for? Works for God.
Yeah, there's a good question, right?
Everybody works for God.
Yeah.
And when you start to see the hand of God in absolutely everything, including, to circle back to earlier in our conversation, Monsanto. It's like, whoa.
Even in Monsanto.
Why is this in my movie? Why is this in my script?
Yeah.
Oh, because I'm resisting evil instead of not feeding it my fear and attention. There's a great quote, by the way, from Neville Goddard. It goes like this: there is a great difference between resisting evil and renouncing it. When you resist evil, you give it your attention. You continue to make it real. When you renounce evil, you take your attention away from it and give your attention to what you want. Now is the time to control your imagination and give your energy to what you want.
Bam. Not great.
Mic drop.
Law of attraction. No, it's really great. I'm glad you just used that word, renounce, resist versus renounce. Like there's power in the distinction of language. Like words create definitely different worlds. And I'm a big fan of that. That was really helpful for me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been so fun. You're amazing.
Yeah, man.
You're just a bright light in the world. Thank you so much for all you shared in this episode, all the good work and miracles that you deliver in the world for others. Just, I think you're an amazing human.
Thank you, Stephan. Really appreciate that. Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, awesome. So if our listener or viewer wants to get in touch with you, follow you, learn from you, read your book, which is Sonic Recovery, and perhaps even work with you on music therapy services or something like that, then how would they get in touch?
Yeah, the easiest place is you can find me on the web at timringgold.com. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, although candidly, mostly post about my world of pickleball, of which I have discovered 2 years ago and am now the total crazed addict of pickleball. If there is such thing as a healthy addiction, pickleball is it. But yeah, come find me online. Let's have a chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tim. And listener, I appreciate you and I love you and I thank you for being a listener and supporting me on my mission. Share this episode with somebody you care about so that we together can share and spread the light. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.